Welcome to the MuseCast, where we squeeze every last drop of inspiration out of Sunday's sermon.
What, Dan?
You're back.
You're not alone.
That's right.
You are not alone.
Man,
I am here with you. You had a fun little time last week without me.
It was pretty lonely. It was pretty sad, you know. I mean, all the cigarette butts and empty liquor bottles probably was a pretty good sign that I was, pretty lonely. So,
yeah, funny. Well, you of course you did a great job. However, I just want to say every once in a while it's good. It's my job security as your co-host to just be gone every once in a while to cause you to miss me. So you're like, oh, never mind.
Right.
Keep her around.
Yes, that's not far from the truth. That's for sure. So
okay,
good
deal.
Your value was evident. Definitely. So
thank you.
In fact, you know what you could do? You could bring that video in if you have to negotiate your, salary or contract or something like that. You could just bring that in and say, look. So yeah. The trade period is officially open, right? So we kind of got to bolster our sides, and thank you for giving me that permission. I think I'll let my agent know. And I'll just have that on the ready when I renegotiate my contract. All right. Well, I did miss you. I missed doing the show. I did catch it, not on Tuesday because I was just still so out of it, but I did catch it later on. So good job manning that ship, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. And so for the first time in 2 weeks, I get to say Happy Muse Day. Yeah. Really good to be here, to see Dan, to see you guys. Well, I don't see you, but I envision you and know that we'll be engaging with one another, chatting later. And so, yay, Muse Day. He is the Dan Kent. I am Shawna Boren, and we just want to say welcome and that we're glad you are here. Dan and I are going to discuss Cedrick Baker's sermon.
Yep.
Don't ask me the title, Dan. Don't do it because I can't. Oh, no. Yeah, no, I got nothing. No, I don't know.
Really?
But what I do, I know. Listen, my brain is still kind of coming out of the fog. So there's only so much bandwidth I have.
Don't bring this episode to your negotiation. So I'll just say that.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. What I do know is we're in a series, The Unveiling, based upon the book of Revelation. And we are in a sub-series called Dear Church, in which we are looking at these 7 letters to the 7 churches. And we are just gleaning all the info that we can from them. Cedrick took on the Church of Laodicea in a wonderfully titled sermon, but you can hit that in your summary. I just wanted to save you more content, yes. Dan. This is for you. It's all for you.
Hey, I more props for you, though, before I do the summary. I counted twice, and there might have been more, where Cedrick said revelations. And out of all of our teaching pastors who have taught from the stage on this series, I think you're the only one batting 100% at not saying revelations. So good for you. So people say that I said revelations. I still haven't found it in the video, but I'm in denial, but for sure you haven't. So
I for sure haven't, and I for sure know that there is video evidence of you saying it. So just be nice is all I'm going to say. You be nice.
No, I will.
That video
I
can
promise.
Very easily make its way to the forefront.
Yeah. So Cedrick's sermon was called The Illusion of Self-Sufficiency. And you knew that one too. I could tell. Good. Well, it was a great sermon. He's looking at Laodicea, and really he kind of like all of us, he has to focus in on what of 24 possible angles could you use to address these churches, because each one of them is packed with a lot of really interesting things, and it hurts a little bit to like, I would have liked to have focused on one of the most famous passages in the Bible is knock. Here I am at the door, I stand and I knock. That's like, you see that on posters, you see that on all t-shirts. I mean, it's like, you could do a whole sermon on what that means and the implications of that. But we, have to focus and kind of focus on what we need to hear as a church during this time. And so in that spirit, Cedrick kind of looked at this kind of situation in Laodicea where they were very wealthy, and they felt like they didn't need anything. And what's really fascinating about this, and Cedrick really kind of highlighted this, is that Laodicea is the only church where Jesus doesn't really say much positive about them. He goes right at them, even though they seem like they're in a really good spot where they don't even need anything. He's like, no, you guys are the farthest from the truth. You are farthest from reality of all the churches, even though from the world's perspective, it might look like you're doing pretty darn good. And how he does that is he says, look, you have intelligence, you've got this culture of knowledge, you've got financial wealth, but he says that you're not really useful. You're not useful for what God is trying to do in the world. And the way that he captures that is he looks at this kind of phrase where Jesus talks about, look, if you were cold water, that's great. If you were hot water, that's great. But you're neither. You're lukewarm, and God will spit you out if you continue to be lukewarm like that. In other words, and this is where Cedrick unpacked this a little bit, with the cold water and the hot water, you can use cold and hot water for a lot of different things. You can't really use lukewarm water for much. Even though lukewarm water might be the most comfortable of the three, it's also the least useful in terms of what you can use the water for. And it's just such a brilliant metaphor for life, because that's exactly what Laodicea was. It was a very comfortable church, but not very useful. And so just like lukewarm water. And it's fascinating too, because Cedrick contrasts Laodicea with Smyrna, who were poor by the world's standards, but Jesus encouraged them because they were wealthy and they didn't realize it. And here in Laodicea, they were really needy and they didn't realize it. So it was the exact 180 from Smyrna. And so what Cedrick proposed is that Laodicea was maybe materially wealthy and culturally informed, but spiritually they were very impoverished and poor. And from there, then Cedrick really sort of kind of starts to apply that to us here in America today. And Laodicea does feel very much like a lot of American churches that are wealthy, that are well educated, but also not very useful. And so Cedrick sort of invites us to consider that. And he looks at Romans 12, 1 and 2, where Paul tells us to offer our entire lives as a living sacrifice. And by giving our all like that, it's in the process of giving ourselves to God that then we are transformed by the renewing of our minds. But the danger is that we can get lulled into this self-sufficiency and this self-oriented pursuit of self. Even when we're not self-sufficient, that's what we're pursuing. We're pursuing this, where I don't need anybody else. I don't need anything else. I am wholly self-sufficient. And that's an easy trap to get lulled into. And so Cedrick looks at the warning that Matthew has in Matthew 19, where Jesus says, look, it is hard for the wealthy to enter the kingdom of heaven. And the language there that Jesus uses is focused on the wealthy person. Like it's not like God is doing everything he can to keep rich people out. That's not the point. The point is it's hard for wealthy people to let go of the things that they are set upon and to pursue the things of God. It's hard to get out of the lukewarm water into more useful water. And Cedrick just shared a really great kind of wisdom nugget from his family, where he says, look, it's okay to have money. It's just that you can't let the money have you. And that all kind of taps into, where is our heart? Is our heart on pursuing self-sufficiency, or is our heart on pursuing Christ-likeness and agape love and so forth? And he talked about how, look, it's pretty easy to kind of think about things like gluttony when it comes to food, or hoarding wealth. But there are all sorts of different types of gluttony. And one of which that might apply to our church is an intellectual gluttony, where we come to the church for all sorts of knowledge and wisdom and profundity, and yet we don't really become useful with that in the world. We just hoard that for ourselves. And I think that was a great warning for a church like ours that does value intellectually coherent faith. And then he finished the sermon off with these three sort of takeaways. The first one is to just remember that God is our source of everything, not knowledge. As great as knowledge is, as important as it is, our source is ultimately God. And that's an important reminder. And then he just taps into what Jesus said for number 2. He said that in the same way that Jesus came to compel, to urge Laodicea to acknowledge their idolatry and to repent from it, that's what we have before us as well, is to acknowledge that we have set our hearts on self-sufficiency, or we have put our trust in knowledge instead of trust in God, and to begin the process of being transformed by the renewing of our mind, begin the process of changing our ways. And then the third one, and this is always the case for a wealthy nation, and it's something that we do need constant reminders of, and that is to resist the pull of wealth. And I think that was a good example. And Cedrick finished off the sermon with a prayer, and also just kind of an example of how he's been wrestling with these things with one of his own house projects. And that's always really helpful to see that kind of personal, real world sort of application of it. That is my summary of Cedrick's sermon, and I'm very grateful to have Cedrick on the teaching team, and he's such a great. I just like our teaching team because we have such great contrasts. He's very different than Greg and I in terms of his delivery, his cadence, and all of that, and it's just it's refreshing to just have that type of diversity in style on the stage, and I love it so much. It's great. Mm-hmm. What did you think of his sermon?
Yeah, I was actually going to say too, I was going to start off by saying how appreciative I am that we have a teaching team that you definitely get different flavors from the message, right? It's the same message, but we all bring different things to the text, different styles, different things that we're noticing. And I just think that is so cool because I think that benefits our community to hear. Now, granted, I love the teaching we get from Greg and you and Paul, and but I also think it's awesome to have other voices speaking out some of that stuff. And I'm just gonna give a shout out. I think it's really cool that someone in Greg's position with his knowledge and his voice, his platform, he readily says, let's have a team of people. He doesn't want to be the only one bringing these messages forth. Yeah. And I just think that's really cool. So I am so thankful for that. First off, super thankful that Cedrick Baker is a part of the teaching team. I always enjoy getting to hear from him. And I really appreciated the illusion of self-sufficiency, Dan. That is the title of the sermon. I really appreciated this because throughout this series, we have been talking about that, yes, studying the scripture is important. And we also believe that there are certain things that are very timely as well as timeless. And I feel like Cedrick really brought forth the point of the timeliness of looking at this letter to the church in Laodicea. And I love that Cedrick said, we need to wake up to the possibility that maybe we are not seeing things fully as they truly are. And as was with the church in Laodicea, they really thought that they were all that in a bucket of chicken. They really thought they had everything going on. They had no need. They were just rolling. And Jesus is like, listen, let me shine some light on that for you. Not, I think, to embarrass them or to belittle them, but just to say, you are absolutely not living into your potential. these riches that you have, this knowledge that you have, this culture that you have could be a vessel for God's light to shine. And you guys are just kind of resting on your laurels. And I thought that Cedrick brought that home really, really well. And I appreciate the way that he brought up the various types of gluttony that you talked about in the summary, because we can easily think of initially when you read a passage like this, your finances. And yes, that is something that we need to submit continually to the Lord. Just because we have it, like Cedrick said, doesn't mean that we should spend it in the way that we want. We should prayerfully consider these things. But there are other areas in our lives that maybe we don't realize that we're hoarding onto this certain blessing. And so I appreciated that he brought up some other things with it. And the intellectual piece, the knowledge piece, I thought that was really great because, like you said, we do benefit from incredible teaching at Woodland. And I think it would be sad if we just hoarded that for ourselves and like, look at us, or to do a Dan Kent move. Look at us. Like we're just, aren't we smart when we know the word and we have the theology down? Okay, great. For what? Like, how are we, being vessels in that area? And so I just really appreciated it. I thought I did not see Cedrick's message or even the letter to Laodicea in scripture as a condemnation. I saw it as, again, like this massive wake up call, like, hello, like, this is all about unveiling truth and dispelling lies. And so anytime we are encouraged to take that mirror, like Cedrick kept mentioning, to take a look at ourselves to see where might we be being deceived, I think is huge. And, I think that I'm going to say one of my favorite things that Cedrick talked about toward the end of the sermon is the fact that we need to do this in community. Because like you and I have said 1,018 times, you don't know. Like if you were deceived, chances are you don't know you're deceived because you're deceived, right? Like you see what you see and that's your truth. And so you need other people to say, excuse me, excuse me, there's something else you need to see here. And so I just really appreciated it. I'm thankful for the reminder. I'm thankful for those bozos in Laodicea that didn't know what the heck was going on, so that we today can wake up to some truths and consider what the Lord may be saying to us about how we've been not seeing things fully, truthfully. So A+ all around.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. That's good. I think the one thing I would just say is I like you were talking about how just the team nature and how everybody brings their own thing. Like literally, I would not have gone the direction that Cedrick went. Like in looking at Laodicea, I just wouldn't have gone that way. And but I think that it's a good way to go, and I think that it's something that we need to hear. And that's I just think that that's part of learning to love together. I mean, you can't have a church that's learning to love together if there's only one person teaching from the pulpit. Yeah. And I'm saying this not as a person who, just knows this. I'm saying it as a person who's realizing this and seeing the wisdom of the kind of the leadership team, and also the wisdom and the humility of Greg of kind of opening that up for other teachers, I think is just so beneficial to the whole body. So I'm probably just
and No. I think it's good because you brought up a good point about how if this were your passage, you would have brought up some different points. And I think that lends to also the reason why these series, we do have plans and ideas and time frames, but sometimes things get a little adjusted because we'll see something and want to hover there and land on something, or another part of the teaching team will follow up and be like, oh, there's something else they want to tap into. And I just think that takes incredible teamwork. I think it takes humility all around and grace. And I'm just so thankful that our community really seems to embrace that. I think there was a day when people would be like, they call the offices and be like, is Greg on this weekend? Like, I feel like we're beyond that. And I think that's really great. Granted, we all love Greg. Please do not hear us saying anything different.
That's right.
We just think what a gift it is to be able to hear from a few other voices as well. And so I think that's awesome. One thing in particular in Cedrick's sermon that he did talk about that I think has been, at least in my life experience, has been a a point of contention, a point of fear, a point of like really messing with some people's God image is the verse about if you're lukewarm, that he will spew you out of his mouth, he being Jesus. And I do appreciate how Cedrick talked about water, you know, just the practicality of water when it comes down from the mountain, the coolness and the usefulness of it, or when it's hot water, the cool, like, you know, the way that it can, you know, help sanitize things. I mean, there's uses for it, but when you were just in this nebulous center, like, what good are you? And so I know a lot of people have struggled with that verse. A lot of people have been evangelized with that verse. I'm not going to say either way, whether that was right or wrong or good or bad. I'm just going to say, I think we need to talk about it a little bit. And we did get in a question about that. And so are you ready? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Or, okay.
Yes.
All right. What does being lukewarm really mean? If a person is somewhere on the spectrum between a raving fundamentalist and an atheist, does Jesus not want that person in his kingdom? Or does Jesus not want people who are not all in or a 100% committed who still have doubts? I think this is a great question. I think it's a question that many people have do have. And so I would love for us to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want me to start?
I do.
Okay. Now, let me just
absolutely do.
Yeah, I read this question this morning, and just, I mean, literally 20 minutes before we started recording, and I've been thinking a lot about this, and I hope I don't over answer it, but I'll just say, anytime you have a hot and cold, and then you have, you know, the middle, I mean, it's a spectrum, and so it can apply to so many different things that could be a spectrum. And, you know, like she was talking about, like a raging fundamentalist Christian versus an atheist. That's the spectrum that this writer had in mind. And, you know, as if this is on one end, that's on the other. But if that's the case, well, don't you want somebody who's very convicted, like the you know, hyper fundamentalist? I mean, the conviction there is good, even if it's misguided. And so how do you make sense of that? I've also heard it like, you know, people will talk about being on fire for God. And so if you're on fire for God, that's what God wants, is for you to be passionate. And if you're lukewarm, well, it's better to just be an atheist than to be lukewarm. Come on, pull yourself up. You can do this. Fire up for God. And there's like this enthusiasm. And we're supposed to then, if we're real Christians, we have all of this gushing enthusiasm. And I'll be honest, that's kind of the perspective when I was a new Christian that I was sort of drawn to. And I liked that idea because I loved the enthusiasm for God. And if God is true, if God exists, then we should be enthusiastic about this. And these Christians who just kind of like go through their day and they don't even look any different than non-Christians. And I could see a case for saying, well, that's who God is going to spit out. And I had a hard time letting go of that. And I heard this discussion about how, well, no, actually, it just has to do with this water being more useful if it's hot or cold. It has nothing really to do with enthusiasm. That hurt because I liked the enthusiasm explanation. But as I've thought more about it, I realized that the enthusiasm explanation has a lot of problems. To be enthusiastic, where does that come from? This idea that enthusiasm is the goal, because a lot of times enthusiasm turns people off, and I think a lot of people will confuse enthusiasm with other things, like, for instance, joy and conviction. And because anyone can put on a show of enthusiasm. Not everyone can actually be convicted of their beliefs. And as I've kind of thought back on kind of the history of, you know, the recent history of the church, the last 200 years, there was this kind of event, or this kind of philosophical kind of evolution that took place in Christianity with Soren Kierkegaard, who kind of viewed faith as sort of like this passionate leap And what he argued, and part of the problem is in the 19th century, you've got the rise of science, and you've got all of these scientific explanations that were really plausible and were really killing the buzz on a lot of simplistic Christian presuppositions about the world. And so it seemed like the Christian story was not really intellectually compelling as we thought it was. And so what is faith then? Well, Soren Kierkegaard said, well, yeah, faith has nothing to do with reason. In fact, the more irrational your belief is, the more your faith is. And so faith is about passion and how much passion you have. And passion is measured by the gap between what you know and what you believe. And if there's a bigger gap there from what you know and what you believe, that means you must have a lot of passion in order to make that leap of faith. And so in the 19th century, this passionate belief became really popular as a way of sort of overturning the weight of doubt that was creeping into the world because of science and so forth. And so I think that that's where this birth of enthusiasm and passion came from. And but that's not, I don't think, a very good understanding of what faith is, because faith isn't the distance between what we know and what we believe, because if that's the case, then the less we know, the greater our faith, because it requires a bigger leap. And but for me, I don't know about other people, but the more I know about God, the greater my faith is. And so I think that whole view of faith is flawed. And it's that view of faith and passion that gave rise to this idea that good faith is enthusiastic and passionate. And so then when you take that understanding to the text and you see Jesus is going to spit out the lukewarm that aren't enthusiastic, you're like, yeah, all right. But if that whole view of faith is flawed, which I think it is, then we have to have a different explanation. And I think the historical considerations of the different types of water and how useful the cold water was and how useful the hot water was, and really how not very useful the lukewarm water was, I think is a much more important point, because the fact is that you can have all sorts of intellectual knowledge. You can have all sorts of enthusiasm. And I've seen it where you're so enthusiastic for God, but you're not really making a difference in anybody else's life. And that's why I think this kind of historical consideration really reveals a more profound truth, which is that the lukewarm water just isn't useful. The lesson is be useful. That's otherwise, like cold is also useful. And so the enthusiasm explanation doesn't really work with that. And so this explanation, I think, is a lot better. And so finally, at some point, I gave up my stubborn kind of clinging to this enthusiasm explanation, and I gave over to this explanation. And now I look back, I'm like, well, what was I thinking there? This makes a lot more sense. So that's my potentially over-answered answer.
No, that's great. And so as a quick follow-up, and then I'll share a couple of my thoughts, just in reference to what you said. And so what do you think was Jesus's point then when he says to them, if it wasn't like, be a raging enthusiast for me, what do you think was his point about, hey, if you're lukewarm, it's just kind of like, think about it, take a drink of water, and it's like, it's just lukewarm. Right. So you're just like, that's not what I expected. What do you think was at the heart of his point in saying that to them?
Yeah, I think the point is that kind of what Cedrick was saying is that if you're hoarding all of your wealth, if you're hoarding your intelligence, if you're not making a difference in other people's lives, if you're not useful like hot water is, or useful like cold water is, but if you're just kind of useless, you're not actually helping anybody else. Lukewarm water might be fine for yourself, but you're not helping anybody else. That's the lesson, is whatever you're learning, whatever you're acquiring, how is that blessing others? How are you? Because really, God calls us to love one another, and our resources and our knowledge and who we are becoming, that's the thing that we are going to bless with. And so it's kind of like if the great commandment was to build Lego models for one another, well, we would need to acquire Legos, and we would need to acquire ideas of things to build. And but the Legos and the ideas themselves aren't really the point. The point would be to actually then build something for somebody else. In the same way, when we're called to love one another, well, we need to be a person worthy of loving, like, or capable of loving, and we need to have intelligence to understand what love is, and we need to be aware of what people need. And so there are things that we need to know, and it helps if we have resources to bless others with, but the resources and the knowledge are not the end in themselves. They're a means to the end of blessing others. That's how I would again probably over answer that.
No, I think it's great. I think it's great. I think I'm in the camp that always, when I heard that verse, it was always the, are you on fire or not?
Yeah.
That was it. It's like fire or not. And so that just doesn't leave much space for nuance, which life is filled with. And I think that is the unfortunate result, one of the unfortunate results of taking a scripture and just like, hurling it at folks and basing an entire ideology on it. I think it's a little dangerous. Because then you think about moments in life when you go through turmoil, or where you go through devastation or heartache, those moments where, things have just happened, and maybe sometimes it's awful things. And in that moment, you're just hopefully crying out in desperation to God for his grace and for his sustenance, and to know that he is present with you in those times of trouble. I wouldn't say that in that moment you're seeing yourself as on fire for God and ready to, you know what I mean? Like, the reality is there are spaces and times, there are entire communities that love the Lord and went through a huge devastation. And so I think I don't like just the binary of hot, cold. I get it. I mean, that is what the scripture is saying, but you have to look beyond what the words are saying. And that's why I appreciate so much that we dive into it a little bit. There has to be space for nuance. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I think your point too, I mean, there are times when you have this devastation, you have something bad happen, you lose a job, you lose, a loved one or whatever. And it's like, yeah, okay, now you're that person who needs the community to share their resources and share themselves, and the usefulness of the water metaphor makes sense of that situation, whereas the be on fire for God explanation doesn't make sense of that situation right there. And that's a good tell, I think, that that explanation isn't the right one, because it doesn't account for, because God doesn't expect you to be all like you said, on fire for God, when you're grieving and lamenting. And so I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. And I think one other point that stuck out to me with this whole part of the scripture is that we have to remember this wasn't like a final indictment. This wasn't you're lukewarm, so I'm done with you. This was again, wake up. You think you're good to go, but you're not. There are things you're not seeing. And so, again, I just think nuance there. This was a wake-up call, and there are and I'm so thankful for the times when I thought I was on the right track, but then I got whether through another person or through scripture or through a teaching, I was awakened to where I was seeing something not quite right. I'm so thankful, because that's where growth happens. I'm so thankful for those moments where we can grow. And hopefully, remember, this relationship is a dynamic relationship, and we should be growing. We shouldn't be stagnant. And if we are, hopefully we have people and resources in our life that can help point that out to us, so that we can get unstuck. And so I think that's just the final thing. This was not a final indictment. This was a warning. This was a wake up call. And so to answer the part of the question of, doesn't Jesus want everyone to come into his knowledge? Of course he does. Of course he does. And the thing is we only see this much. We don't know what else Jesus is doing, all around to draw a person to him. So again, he is infinitely creative.
Yeah. I want to go back to something that you said earlier too, because I do think
Sure.
that like we are I think we're called into something that will fill our hearts with joy and peace.
Yeah.
And Paul says that
Yeah.
I think in Romans 15 to let that joy and peace flow out of you. But that's something that just happens. It's not something that you contrive. It's not enthusiasm. It's in fact a lot of times joy can be very peaceful. It can just be very kind of calm. The world goes up and down in enthusiasm and dread, and whereas I think that the joy of God is a type of peace, it's a type of calm, it's a type of fullness, and I think we should definitely live out of that fullness, but that's a fullness that is compatible with grieving. It's compatible with lament, whereas enthusiasm is not, and so it's very different
Correct.
in that way. So.
Absolutely. And again, to tag on to what you're saying, I think that joy, that fullness comes when we have ourselves plugged into the right source, right? So that's where that sustainability comes. When we are plugged into him as our source, he then is able to sustain us in these topsy-turvy moments. And it doesn't mean we don't feel a gamut of emotions. That's not, of course we're going to feel things, but we can have that sustaining joy. We can have that sustaining peace in the midst of it all because we are plugged in to the source.
Yeah, because that enthusiasm is not sustainable.
No, it's
enthusiasm,
not.
It's not.
Yeah, no, it's not. And man, oh man, it can mask a multitude of things.
Yes.
I'll just say that.
Yes, it can.
All right, Dan Kent, I have one final question for you. Inquiring minds want to know. The people want to know, and by people I mean me. Why are you so dressed up today, Dan Kent?
Oh, do I look dressed up? It's just I no reason. I think okay. I'm traveling right now, so I have like 6 shirts, and I think I just need to do laundry. So
okay.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I wish I had a great reason, but.
I thought maybe you were preparing to take Barb out, like to celebrate,
Well, we do have an anniversary this weekend. Our anniversary is this weekend, and we will be going out to celebrate, but not yet. Woo! Although we are going to go see Bob Dylan on Thursday, so I'm excited about that.
Really?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Oh, have so much fun. That sounds amazing. All right. Well, Dan, thank you for that explanation. I'm not saying you don't normally look dapper, but this was a little spruced up today. So I just wanted to know what was going on.
I will say it. Normally I do not look dapper. Yes, I will say it.
All right. I think this is as good a time as any to transition into Nugget time. Woo-hoo! Nugget time for the illusion of self-sufficiency. Dan, what is your nugget?
All right. My nugget is, yes, that's what my nugget is. So Cedrick talked about kind of where our heart is and not putting our heart in our pursuit of money, but to rest our heart in God and trust God as the source of everything. And Proverbs 4, I think it's 4:23, Solomon, or whoever wrote that one, says that to guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of all life. And we tend to think that we get life from acquiring things out there, but from the early on in the Old Testament and in the history of God's people, they realize that no, it's in our heart, and where our heart is, that's where we get our life from. And I really like this passage in Romans, and I think I might have even alluded to this in our discussions. Oh shoot, I did not save the right one. Let me find it. Hold on a second. This is where we need like some elevator music to while I find my verse. Here it is. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hey, that's pretty good. Yeah, I would ride an elevator with that music in it. That was great. So it's kind of this a cappella bit. Yes. So we guard our heart, and we put our heart in God. And then Paul says this in Romans 15, verse 13, may the God of hope fill you with joy and peace as you trust in him. so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. And so here's, I think, just this such a succinct verse that says, look, when you do put your trust in God, well, he is going to fill your heart with joy and peace to the extent that you trust him. And I tell you what, whatever you acquire, in whatever you get out of the things that you buy and the, how you try to secure yourself in the world, it's not as good as joy, and it's not as good as peace, and it's not as lasting as the Lord is. And so I just think that that's such a beautiful kind of foundation. That's what we really want. And then he says, let that joy and peace overflow, that hope that you have in God, let that overflow to others. And that's what people see, is they see your joy and they see your peace and they see the hope that you have that doesn't need as much as the world needs, because a world that doesn't have that hope, doesn't have that joy, they're going to clamor for other substitutes in the world. And what a beautiful thing that God promises us, that when we put our trust in God, we don't need to clamor for that stuff that many of us have clamored for, myself included. And the more I can learn to live and to just embrace that joy and to live into that joy and peace and hope, and learn to kind of grow that in my heart, the less I need these other things like I think I do. That would be my nugget.
Amen. Double thumbs up, Dan. That's what you get for your nugget. Looky there. I think once again, our nuggets tie nicely together. For my nugget, I just want to circle back to and continue what you were saying about source. I think Cedrick said it well. You said it beautifully in your nugget. We need to remember to be reminded, not just daily, but continually throughout the day, to make sure that God is our source, that our heart is filled to overflowing, and that he is our source. We in Cedrick, we're not at all saying it's bad to have money, it's bad to have knowledge. It's like, no, it is absolutely fine to have resources and to have blessings and things that you enjoy. But I think if you live in a scarcity mindset where you're getting your reliance, when you rely upon and you're getting your security from the external things, that is not going to be something that is sustainable, and nor is it good or healthy. When God is your source, you can have this assurance, right? The steadiness of knowing that whatever happens, you are still held by him. Your source is him. And so that means that you're not scared to lose. You're not scared to be generous with your resources or with the things that you are learning. You can freely give away where you feel led, because you know that you are not going to be without. And so it's a scarcity mindset versus an abundance mindset. And by abundance, I mean abundance in him. So whatever he bestows upon us, I think enjoy it. Right? Live it and do that, but also be a conduit for that to flow through you to others. Allow him to be your source. And so beyond just saying that, I think it's important to take time to reflect of all the things in your life and all the spaces that you occupy, to say, are there areas in which I'm not relying on him as my source? If you are really good at your job, awesome. Are you relying on just you alone and your talent and what you know? Or do you recognize that you tap into another source? And again, nothing is evil or bad. It's just like making sure that our reliance is on the right thing and not just on ourselves and what we accumulate and what we can do, because that will inevitably trip us up. And so again, just an encouragement to examine your life, examine your priorities, consider Jesus, in our decisions, and allow him to motivate you and continually be your source.
Awesome.
Amen. All right, Amen. Dan Kent. That is it for us today.
That is it. I tell you what, your little Texasisms, we don't say "ut" up here. We say "it." That's that's how we do it. But you're from Texas, so
yeah. That is it for us today. We want to thank you for tuning in. Remember, continue to send in questions, comments, musecast@whchurch.org. It'll be right down there, and we will see you 4 p.m. in the chat. And you guys have a great week. Thanks so much. Tune in because Dear Church is still going, and we're going to still be talking about it.
That's right. See you guys.
Bye, guys.